In the distant future, Earth lay in ruins, a once thriving planet now a mere shadow of its former glory. The alien invaders, known as the Axaroth, had arrived like a storm, swift and merciless. They were a technologically superior species, and they saw themselves as the rightful rulers of the universe. Their invasion of Earth was brutal, wiping out humanity's cities and forcing the survivors into hiding or extermination. The Axaroth had no mercy, wiping out entire populations with ease, leaving nothing but silence in their wake. For decades, the planet had remained quiet, too quiet. Humanity was thought to have perished, lost to the vastness of time and the overwhelming might of the Axaroth. The aliens had crowned themselves the new rulers of Earth, believing their victory was absolute, their dominance unquestionable. Yet, in the heart of this ravaged world, beneath the cracked surface of a forgotten city, a man stirred. Lieutenant Marcus O'Connor, once a soldier in humanity's last stand, had been buried alive, trapped in an underground bunker far from the destruction above. For years, he had been in a deep cryogenic sleep, the sounds of war and death echoing only as faint whispers in his dreams. But now something had changed. The hum of Parath technology vibrated through the walls of the bunker, a sound that Marcus hadn't heard in years, perhaps decades. It was a cold, mechanical noise, unlike anything he had ever heard before, but it was unmistakable. Someone was up there. The Earth had shifted, and it wasn't just the rumbling of the planet beneath him. With a sharp intake of breath, Marcus slowly opened his eyes, his senses assaulting him with the weight of the years that had passed. The faint smell of dust and metal filled his nostrils, a stark reminder of how long he had been buried in isolation. The world outside was different now, but the thought that humanity was gone was wrong. His heart raced as his mind raced through the memories of the war, the final battle, the desperation, the alien onslaught. But it didn't matter now. The silence of the world above told him something had changed. With painstaking effort, he pushed himself to his feet, his body sore and stiff from years of dormancy. The walls of the bunker felt cold and alien, but his instincts kicked in, guiding him through the dark, crumbling corridors toward the exit. There was no plan, no map to follow, just the faint hum of alien machinery above. As he ascended through the twisting, dimly lit tunnels, he realized something profound. Despite all odds, he was alive. The war had taken its toll on humanity, but survival was in his blood. He had fought for a future, and somehow he had made it through. As Marcus reached the surface and stepped into the ruins of Earth, a heavy weight settled in his chest. The world he knew had been swallowed by the fires of war, the cities reduced to rubble, the skies no longer filled with the bustling sounds of life. Instead, they were tainted with the ever-present shadow of Tharoth ships floating above. The air was thick, unnatural, and it weighed on his spirit like a blanket of sorrow. Yet, amid this wreckage, something inside him sparked. Hope. It wasn't gone. The Axaroth had failed to eradicate humanity completely, and though the alien presence lingered like a thick fog, Marcus knew something they didn't. There were survivors out there, people who had hidden, who had lived in the forgotten corners of the world. He wasn't alone. The Axaroth had made a terrible mistake, believing that their power could crush the human spirit entirely. But Marcus was proof that they had underestimated humanity's resilience. And now, standing on the edge of a broken world, he vowed that they would regret ever thinking humanity was gone. The war might have ended, but the fight for Earth was far from over. Marcus stepped into the wreckage of a world he once knew, the weight of time pressing down on him like a heavy shroud. The landscape stretched out before him, a barren wasteland of ruins and overgrown wilderness. The cities he had once fought to protect were now shattered skeletons, their towering skyscrapers reduced to crumbling rubble, their streets filled with the whispers of forgotten lives. Nature had begun to reclaim what was left behind. Vines wrapped around broken buildings, and trees grew where concrete once dominated the landscape. The air tasted foreign, thick with dust and an unnatural stillness, as though the planet itself was holding its breath, waiting. Every step Marcus took was met with the haunting silence of a world abandoned. He could almost feel the pulse of life fading away, leaving only memories. His heart ached as he moved through the wasteland, his mind racing with the images of his past, of Earth before the war. But the past was gone. This was the present, a broken world. The HFY was still here, hovering in the skies like vultures, watching over their conquered prize. For days, Marcus wandered through the ruins, searching for signs of life, any evidence that humanity had survived. He found nothing but destruction and death, the remnants of a once thriving civilization now lost to the alien conquerors. The war had been ruthless, and the survivors, if there were any, had scattered into the shadows, hiding from the HFY's unrelenting patrols. But Marcus refused to believe that humanity had been entirely wiped out. There had to be others, people who had survived the initial onslaught, hidden away in the forgotten corners of the earth. The very idea that humans had simply given up was impossible to accept. Marcus was proof that survival was in their blood, and if he had made it through, then others could have too. His determination only grew stronger with each step. He wasn't just wandering, he was searching for hope, for a chance to ignite the spark of resistance that had once burned so brightly. Then, on the third day of his journey, Marcus came across them. A small group of survivors, huddled in a makeshift camp deep within the ruins of what was once a thriving suburb. They were a ragtag bunch, a mix of old and young, men and women, their faces drawn with exhaustion and fear. They looked nothing like the soldiers Marcus had fought alongside during the war. These were people who had given up, their spirits broken by the constant threat of the HFY. They moved quietly, speaking in whispers, their eyes always darting to the skies in fear of the alien patrols above. They were the last remnants of humanity, living in the shadows, convinced that their fate had been sealed long ago. At first, they didn't trust Marcus. He was an outsider, a stranger in a world where strangers were dangerous. But as Marcus spoke, something in his voice resonated with them. He didn't speak of despair or survival in the way they had grown accustomed to. He spoke of hope. He spoke of taking back their planet. The words were foreign to them now, a distant memory, but in Marcus's eyes, they saw something they hadn't seen in years: conviction. They listened as he outlined a vision, not just of survival, but of rebellion. The HFY had come to Earth thinking they could crush humanity, believing they could erase the human spirit with their advanced technology and brutal force. But Marcus refused to accept that. He spoke of humanity's strength, of its ability to adapt, to fight even when the odds were impossible. The survivors, worn down and frightened, had forgotten what it meant to have a cause, to fight for something greater than themselves. Marcus reminded them that they weren't alone, that the fight was not over. Slowly, the spark of hope rekindled in their hearts. They weren't the last of humanity, they were the beginning. Together, they could do what the HFY thought was impossible. They could fight back, but it wouldn't be easy. The HFY controlled the skies, and their forces were vast. Marcus knew that the road ahead would be dangerous, but he also knew that the heart of humanity was its greatest weapon. He wasn't just leading them to survive, he was leading them to fight, to reclaim their home. The journey ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: humanity was not gone. It had only just begun to rise again, and Marcus O'Connell was ready to lead the charge. As Marcus continued to rally the survivors and forge a plan for humanity's return to power, the HFY leadership remained blissfully ignorant of the growing threat in the shadows. To them, Earth had long been subdued, its population wiped out, its resistance crushed. They believed the war was over, and humanity's once great civilization was nothing more than a distant, irrelevant memory. The HFY had moved on, consolidating their hold over Earth, setting up their imperial governors and fortresses across the devastated planet. Their empire stretched beyond Earth's atmosphere, ready to expand into the furthest reaches of the galaxy. For the HFY, the humans had been nothing more than a brief nuisance, a species unworthy of their attention. They were convinced that their victory over Earth was total and absolute. There were no survivors to oppose them, no remnants of humanity left to challenge their dominance. The skies above Earth were filled with Xaroth ships, patrolling the desolate world below, but they saw no threat in the silence. Humanity had been wiped away, and the Axaroth believed they had done the impossible. They had extinguished the spark of human defiance forever. General Kavar, the highest-ranking officer in the Axaroth military, was particularly dismissive of the humans. His eyes gleamed with arrogance, and his belief in his race's superiority was absolute. He had personally overseen the final phase of the war, watching as human cities were reduced to ash and their resistance forces scattered to the wind. The human spirit, once thought to be unbreakable, had been shattered beneath the might of the Xaroth's superior technology and overwhelming numbers. To Kavar, humanity was a primitive species that had no place in the galaxy. Their resistance, he thought, had been a futile and desperate attempt to cling to a world that had already been lost. Now, he focused all his energy on expanding Xaroth rule and silencing any remnants of rebellion. But what Kavar failed to recognize was the power of human resolve. His arrogance clouded his judgment, leading him to underestimate the very thing that made humanity unique, the ability to endure and adapt. While the Axaroth focused on their grand expansion plans, unaware of any lingering human presence, Marcus was quietly gathering a force, training survivors, and piecing together the remnants of humanity's lost technology. The survivors, who had long given up hope, now believed in the possibility of reclaiming their planet, all because of Marcus's unwavering belief that humanity was not finished. The Axaroth were too distracted by their own perceived greatness to notice the subtle changes happening on Earth. The human survivors, scattered and beaten, began to regroup. They started to form small communities in the shadows of the Xaroth's watchful eyes. Marcus's leadership was like a spark in the darkness, igniting the will to fight in those who had lost everything. He trained them, armed them, and filled them with purpose. Slowly, Marcus's resistance grew. They used the broken remnants of Arath technology, repurposing it to strike back where the invaders were weakest. A few small attacks on Xaroth's supply lines and communication towers went unnoticed, but they served a greater purpose. They proved that humanity was not as broken as the Axaroth believed. As the survivors began to take action, Kavar and the Axaroth military grew complacent. They had no reason to believe that humans, the species they had all but exterminated, would ever rise again. General Kavar, sitting in the comfort of his luxurious command center, dismissed any reports of human activity as mere myths or isolated incidents. To him, these were just fleeting problems that would be dealt with quickly and without effort. He was focused on the future of Xaroth expansion, planning for new conquests and securing their dominance over a galaxy that was ripe for the taking. But in his hubris, he failed to see the storm building on Earth, the quiet fury of humanity that was silently gathering strength. The cracks in the armor of the Axaroth Empire were already forming, and they had no idea that the greatest challenge they would face was not some alien species from another star system, but the very humans they had so casually written off. Marcus and his growing resistance were no longer just survivors. They were a force, and they were about to show that Axaroth just how wrong they were. The complacency of the Axaroth, their belief in their own invincibility, was about to become their greatest weakness. What they had overlooked, what they had underestimated, was coming for them, and this time they wouldn't be able to crush it so easily. As the days passed, Marcus's plan for the future of humanity began to take shape. He was not just a survivor anymore, he was a leader, and the survivors saw it in him. At first, many had doubted, unsure of what they could do in the face of the Axaroth's overwhelming power. The scars of the war were still fresh in their minds, and the weight of their loss kept them in a constant state of fear. But Marcus wasn't afraid. He refused to let humanity be remembered as a broken species. His strength wasn't just in his physical abilities. It was in his belief that humanity had more to offer than anyone, even the Axaroth, could imagine. Slowly, one by one, the survivors began to rally behind him. He began to train them, showing them how to fight with whatever tools they could find, old, rusted military weapons, salvaged Thorath tech, and most importantly, their own ingenuity. They had no advanced weapons or resources, but what they did have was their determination. At first, the training was rough. The survivors were civilians, not soldiers. They were weak, tired, and skeptical. Many of them had seen too much pain to believe in a brighter future. But Marcus's unwavering leadership started to change their hearts. He led by example, showing them how to use their environment, how to think on their feet, how to adapt to the unpredictable nature of this new world. He demonstrated that even in the darkest of times, humans could be more than just survivors. They could be fighters. As the days turned into weeks, the group grew stronger. Their movements became more coordinated, their skills more refined. They were still far from matching the might of the Axaroth, but with Marcus's guidance, they began to find their own strength. And with each passing day, their hope grew. One evening, while exploring the ruins of an old military base, Marcus stumbled upon a hidden archive, buried deep beneath layers of concrete and twisted metal. The archive had been designed to keep humanity's secrets safe from any invader, an underground vault containing humanity's most advanced technologies, long forgotten after the war. The vault was full of data, blueprints, and records of human ingenuity, the kind of inventions and weapons that had once made Earth a force to be reckoned with. It was a treasure trove of knowledge, untouched by the Axaroth. As Marcus dug through the archive's contents, he discovered something that made his heart race: a set of blueprints for advanced weaponry that could potentially rival the Axaroth's most destructive devices. These weren't just theoretical designs, they were detailed plans, the kind that had once been used to develop weapons capable of devastating entire fleets. Some of the technology was based on Earth's own resources, while other pieces appeared to be inspired by the alien technology that the Axaroth had left behind. The designs were old, yes, but they were far from outdated. If anything, they held the key to turning the tide of the war. With this technology, humanity could strike at the heart of the Axaroth's control over Earth. The plans in the vault showed Marcus that humanity had not been entirely helpless. The power to reclaim their home had been lying in wait, hidden beneath the rubble of their own defeat. Marcus knew what he had to do. This was the spark of rebellion that he had been searching for, the spark that would ignite humanity's fight for survival. He gathered his most trusted survivors and shared his discovery with them. The excitement that spread through the group was palpable, as if a weight had been lifted from their shoulders. The weapons in these blueprints weren't just tools for destruction. They were symbols of resistance, a reminder that humanity had the potential to fight back and win. Together, they began to work on a plan to bring these weapons to life, using every scrap of material they could find and combining it with the knowledge of old military engineers who had once designed these technologies. It wouldn't be easy, and it would take time, but for the first time since the war had begun, Marcus could see the path forward. He knew that Axaroth would never see it coming. They were too complacent, too sure of their own victory. Marcus's group, small and unassuming, had discovered a way to break their stranglehold on Earth. And while the Axaroth continued their expansion, blind to the growing threat beneath their feet, Marcus and the survivors were preparing for something the aliens would regret. A new chapter in humanity's struggle was about to begin, and this time, the enemy would not be so confident in their victory. The time had come. After weeks of preparation, training, and gathering intelligence, Marcus and his small band of survivors were ready to strike. Their first target, Axaroth outpost deep in the heart of what was once a bustling industrial region. It was one of the many Axaroth-controlled installations scattered across Earth, and Marcus knew it would be a symbol of what humanity could do. The mission was risky, but it was their chance to show the aliens that humanity was still capable of resistance. Armed with makeshift weapons, salvaged Thorath tech, and their knowledge of guerrilla tactics, they moved under the cover of darkness. The survivors had learned to blend into the ruins, using the broken landscape to their advantage. Every step was calculated, every movement to liberate. They knew that if they made even the smallest mistake, the Axaroth would respond with overwhelming force. The plan was simple: sabotage the Xaroth's communications and disrupt their supply lines. It was a small blow, but a meaningful one. The Axaroth relied on their technology to maintain their control, and a disruption in their network would send ripples through their operations. As they approached the outpost, Marcus could feel the adrenaline surge through him. This was it, the first real test of their abilities. They moved silently through the darkened streets, using the remnants of human cities as cover. The Axaroth had grown complacent, too confident in their power to consider the possibility that humans might still be out there, fighting for survival. Their defenses were lax, their patrols predictable. With swift precision, Marcus and his team infiltrated the outpost's communications center. They planted explosives, carefully timed to cause maximum damage without alerting the enemy. Once they were in position, the countdown began. The seconds stretched into what felt like hours. When the explosion finally erupted, the Xaroth's communication hub was crippled, sending shockwaves through their network. For a few precious moments, they were blind, unable to coordinate, unable to respond. It was their moment to strike. But Marcus wasn't done yet. As the chaos unfolded, the team moved quickly to disrupt the Xaroth's supply lines. They sabotaged fuel tanks, destroyed supply crates, and cut off access to critical resources. It was a hit-and-run attack, designed to hurt the Xaroth's ability to sustain their forces without putting the humans in direct danger. When the job was done, they vanished back into the shadows, retreating into the ruins with the same quiet precision with which they had arrived. The victory was small, but it was a victory nonetheless. It was a message. Humanity was not gone. Marcus and his team had proven that humans were still capable of fighting back, even in the face of overwhelming odds. It wasn't a decisive blow to the Axaroth, but it was enough to stir something inside them, a realization that they were no longer in complete control. The Axaroth had underestimated humanity, and now the first cracks in their empire had begun to show. When the news of the attack reached General Kavar, his anger was palpable. He had believed that the human resistance was a myth, something to be laughed at. But now he could no longer ignore the truth. Humanity was fighting back, and they had done it in a way that caught the Axaroth completely off guard. His pride had been wounded, and his arrogance had been shattered. In a rage, Kavar ordered a full-scale counterattack. He sent his forces on a mission to hunt down Marcus and his team, determined to crush them before they could build any more momentum. But Marcus was already thinking 2 steps ahead. He knew that Xaroth would retaliate, but he also knew they would be blinded by their anger. Marcus and his survivors didn't stay in one place for long. They were ghosts in the ruins, always moving, always striking where the Axaroth were weakest. Each attack was carefully planned, each retreat executed with precision. The Axaroth sent their troops to the cities, but they were always one step behind. Marcus and his team became a shadow that haunted the aliens at every turn. They were no longer just survivors, they were fighters. The tides were starting to shift. The Axaroth had underestimated humanity once, and now they were learning the hard way that Earth was not the prize they thought it was. Marcus had sparked something in the survivors, a fire that could not be easily extinguished. The first strike was only the beginning, and the Axaroth were about to realize that humanity was far more dangerous than they had ever believed. The Axaroth had underestimated humanity once, and they were about to make the same mistake again. After the raid on their outpost, General Kavar's patience had worn thin. He knew that if Marcus and his survivors were left unchecked, they could become a real threat to the Xaroth's control over Earth. In a fit of rage, Kavar ordered a massive offensive, concentrating his forces on the ruined city of New Chicago, the heart of the human resistance. The city, a once thriving metropolis now reduced to rubble, would be the perfect place to wipe out the last of humanity's will to fight. It was there that Marcus had been leading his attacks, always striking quickly and retreating before the Axaroth could mount a full response. Kavar believed that by overwhelming the city, He would crush the survivors once and for all, stamping out the last flicker of resistance. But the Azeroth had not reckoned with the human spirit. Marcus and his people were not simply fighting for survival, they were fighting for everything they had lost, everything they had once known. The survivors, now hardened by months of battle, knew what was at stake. They had witnessed their homes, their families, and their entire civilization fall, but they had never lost their will to survive. When the first waves of Azeroth forces began to pour into New Chicago, Marcus didn't hesitate. He knew that this battle would define the future of humanity, one way or another. It wasn't just about holding ground. It was about making the Azeroth realize that no matter how powerful their forces were, they could not crush the human spirit. The battle began with a roar. The ground shook as Azeroth war machines marched through the wreckage, their massive forms casting long shadows over the city's ruined skyline. The survivors, armed with whatever weapons they could scavenge, guns, explosives, and even repurposed Azeroth technology, moved into position, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The first wave of attacks was a blow of chaos, gunfire echoing through the desolate streets, explosions lighting up the night sky. The Azeroth were expecting a panicked, disorganized response, but instead, they were met with a relentless, coordinated defense. The humans fought with a fury that no one had anticipated, using their environment to their advantage, ambushing the Azeroth from hidden positions, and striking hard when they least expected it. Marcus led the charge, his every move calculated, his focus unshakable. He had studied the Azeroth's technology, learning how to use their own weapons against them. The survivors had become experts in taking down Azeroth drones, disabling their energy shields, and hijacking their vehicles. As the battle raged on, Marcus led a bold assault on the Azeroth's command center, a heavily fortified structure deep within the city. It was a suicide mission, but Marcus knew it was the only way to turn the tide in their favor. His team stormed the building, fighting tooth and nail to break through Azeroth defenses. The Azeroth didn't understand what they were facing. They had never fought an enemy like this before, an enemy fueled by something they could never comprehend, a deep, unbreakable desire to reclaim their home. Days of intense combat followed, with both sides suffering heavy losses. The streets of New Chicago became a battleground, filled with the remnants of destroyed Azeroth machines and the bodies of fallen survivors. Yet, despite the mounting casualties, the humans never faltered. They fought with a desperation born of necessity, driven by the thought that if they failed, they would lose everything. The Azeroth, on the other hand, were not prepared for such fierce resistance. Their superior technology and numbers had made them complacent, and now they found themselves trapped in a war of attrition, where victory was no longer assured. Marcus's relentless assault on their command center began to take its toll. As their communications broke down and their leadership faltered, the Azeroth forces started to crumble under the pressure. In the end, the human resistance emerged battered but not broken. The command center was seized, and the Azeroth forces were forced to retreat, their once proud offensive turned into a humiliating defeat. The survivors of New Chicago stood victorious, their courage and determination earning them a hard-won victory. But for Marcus and his team, this battle was just the beginning. They had proven that the Azeroth were not invincible, but even in the face of overwhelming power, humanity's will to survive could not be crushed. The Battle of New Chicago would be remembered as a turning point in the war, a symbol of what humanity was capable of when it fought for its future. And though the war was far from over, the Azeroth would now know that humanity had not given up, not now, not ever. The tide of battle had turned. With the Azeroth command center destroyed and their forces scattered, humanity's resolve had only grown stronger. The survivors, emboldened by their victory in New Chicago, pressed their advantage with renewed determination. But Marcus knew the war was far from over. The Azeroth might be in disarray, but they were still a powerful enemy, and there was one final blow that needed to be struck, one that would ensure their retreat and secure Earth's future for good. During the aftermath of the battle, As Marcus sifted through the wreckage of the Axaroth technology and human archives, he made a discovery that would change everything. Hidden deep within an old military research facility, Marcus uncovered an ancient human invention, a weapon long thought to be lost. This weapon, a sophisticated electromagnetic pulse device, had the potential to disable the Axaroth's advanced technology completely, rendering their fleets and war machines useless. It was a forgotten relic from an earlier era, a piece of humanity's ingenuity that had been buried in the chaos of war, but now it was the key to their victory. With this newfound weapon in their hands, Marcus and his team wasted no time. They knew that Axaroth would not just retreat quietly, they would regroup, rearm, and come back stronger than ever. This was their chance to strike the final, crippling blow. The survivors launched a coordinated assault on the remaining Axaroth strongholds, using the electromagnetic pulse to disable their weaponry and technology at every turn. The Axaroth, caught completely off guard, were left helpless as their once mighty machines went dark, their shields flickered and failed, and their communications became a jumble of static. For the first time since their arrival on Earth, the Axaroth were fighting on even terms with humanity, and they were losing. The battle was brutal, but the survivors were relentless. They fought with everything they had, their courage and determination driving them forward as the electromagnetic pulses took down one Axaroth ship after another. Each strike was a step closer to reclaiming Earth, and each victory sent a powerful message to the aliens. Humanity was not a species to be underestimated. The last of the Axaroth forces scrambled to leave Earth, their ships lifting off from the planet's surface in a desperate bid to escape the devastation. But it was too late. The survivors had won. The skies that had once been filled with the ominous hum of Axaroth warships were now quiet, the invaders retreating back into the void of space, their empire's dream of dominating Earth shattered beyond repair. As Marcus stood among the survivors, watching the last Axaroth ship disappear into the atmosphere, he felt a sense of accomplishment, yet also a deep responsibility. The battle for Earth had been won, but the war for humanity's future had only just begun. The planet was scarred, but it was healing. Nature had begun to reclaim the land, and the survivors were beginning to rebuild. The struggle had not been in vain. Humanity had proved to itself and to the universe that it was capable of great things, even in the face of extinction. Marcus's eyes swept over the ruins of the world that had once been his home, now slowly recovering. The fires of war had left their mark, but the human spirit, unbroken and stronger than ever, would rebuild. And as the survivors began to restore what had been lost, Marcus knew that the message would echo across the galaxy. Never again would humanity be underestimated. They had fought against impossible odds, against an enemy who believed they were nothing more than an afterthought, a species destined for extinction. But in the end, humanity had made the universe regret its assumptions. The last Axaroth ship disappeared, and as Marcus stood at the forefront of the new era, he realized that humanity had not only survived, it had emerged stronger than ever. The galaxy would soon learn the true power of humankind. The universe had underestimated them, but Marcus knew better now. This was only the beginning. Humanity was back, and it was here to stay.